Committee of the Whole for November 10th will come to order. First, I'd like to start out by thanking all the veterans, since it's Veterans Day tomorrow. Thank you for your past service. Have a pleasant Veterans Day. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Taberky,
Present.
Mr. Brickwig,
Here.
Ms. Hausfeld,
Here.
Mr. Bob Culbertson,
Here.
Ms. Bettinghouse,
Here.
Mr. Ray Culbertson,
Here.
and Mr. Schildmeyer.
Present.
Let the record show that all 7 members are present. Council, what is your, what is council's pleasure on the approval of the written minutes of October 27th council meeting?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to approve the written minutes of the October 27th council meeting.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld to approve the written minutes of the October 27th council meeting. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. The next thing on the agenda is to, if I could get a motion to place, I believe everybody saw that Heidi Culbertson had passed along a codified ordinance update and asked that ordinance be placed on the table for the next meeting. If I could get a motion to do so.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to put the codified ordinance on the council meeting for November 17th.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld to place the ordinance on the table to update the codified ordinances. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. At this time, we will turn it over to Michelle Balls from Hamilton County Resource to give us a presentation.
Thank you so much for having me. I am with Hamilton County Resource. Our name used to be Hamilton County Recycling and Solid Waste District. We changed it to make it shorter, easy to remember last year. So we are now Hamilton County Resource. We are a state mandated agency. Every county in Ohio has to have a solid waste district, but we are non-regulatory, so we can't force anyone to recycle or compost. But our mission is to reduce how much waste goes to the landfill. So we really have 2 main functions. One is we have a lot of programs to try to reduce waste going to the landfill. The other is our solid waste plan. So according to Ohio Revised Code, we have to write a 15-year solid waste plan and update that plan every 5 years. It takes about 2 years to update the plan, so you can do the math. We do this a lot. We are in the process of finalizing that plan, and we will be bringing it to all the 48 communities early next year for ratification. So I'm going to go through a couple programs. I don't know if you're timing me, but I'm hoping 6 minutes. So a couple of the programs that you may know, one is our grant programs. We have a residential recycling incentive grant that we give out to communities every year. Every year, St. Bernard reports to us how many tons you've recycled and composted and landfilled. And we put that into an Excel spreadsheet with all the other 47 communities and then split the money up like a pie in order to help offset the costs of the recycling and the any composting that you do. Last year, St. Bernard received about $6,800 through that program. We also have outreach campaigns. So we do, you may have seen recycling advertisements that we've done over the years. Most recently, we've had a Wasted Food Stops With Us campaign trying to encourage residents to reduce how much food waste they are throwing away. The average family throws away between $1,500 and $1,800 worth of groceries every year that never get eaten. So we are trying to encourage people to reduce that. We also have an environmental enforcement officer. We pay a full-time sheriff deputy to investigate illegal dumping. So if St. Bernard, you ever have hot spots where you see a lot of dumping, they can partner with Hamilton County Public Health, get some cameras in there, and try to investigate and actually prosecute somebody. Finally, we have our household hazardous waste and yard trimmings drop-off programs that residents directly come to us and bring material. So our solid waste plan, it is almost 300 pages long, so I'm not expecting you to read all of it, but I'm going to give you some highlights. You can find it on our website, hamiltoncountyresource.org, under About Us, if you're really interested to see it. I would love for you to read it. So like I said, early next year we'll be going out for ratification. According to Ohio Revised Code, we have to have communities representing 60% of the population of Hamilton County approve the plan. Last time we had 100%, so thank you for voting for it last time. I'm just going to go through 3 highlights, kind of changes, some new things. One is to the Residential Recycling Incentive Program. So we are going to maintain funding for that program at $800,000. Should our revenues go up higher than projected, the first $100,000 over our projected revenue will go into that program as well. So we will have $900,000. So we're doing a few changes to that program, though. One is we're setting a minimum threshold. We found that there's some smaller communities that aren't receiving very much money at all. The lowest was $39 last year. I just can't do much with $39. So we're going to set a minimum threshold so that every community gets at least enough that they could fund a community drop-off if they didn't have curbside recycling available to their residents. The other thing that we're doing is we are going to allow communities, right now it's a residential recycling incentive. We're going to have to change the name because we're going to allow communities to claim commercial tonnage. So that's really good for St. Bernard because you have a lot of businesses. So you would be able to claim any recycling or even composting that your businesses were doing, and that would add to your diversion rate, and you would get dollars per ton for that. We don't know exactly how we're going to do that yet, but we're going to do it. The next thing we're going to do is increase business assistance. So we have a lot of assistance right now for residents, but about 86% of the waste generated in Hamilton County are businesses and industries. So we already have some business programs. We're going to beef those up. We're going to put more staff resources, and we're going to add $100,000 to that budget. So it'll be about $250,000 that will be just for businesses and reducing that. The last thing we did is we hired a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant because we want to make sure that we're reaching all residents in Hamilton County and all people who work in Hamilton County. So they were really helpful. We have their report in our plan. We also have it available separately on the website. Looking at our programs, what can you do differently? For instance, our House of Hazardous Waste has always been a one-day drop-off on a Saturday. You have to be off on a Saturday. You have to be able to have a car to drive yourself to the event. So it's not that accessible. So we're trying to come up with ways that we can improve that accessibility. The last thing I want to mention that's not related to DEI, but that we are looking into right now is our out-of-district fees. So the fees that Butler County and Warren County, places outside of Hamilton County pay to bring waste into Hamilton County. We are looking into if we raised those fees, would that decrease how much waste was coming into Hamilton County? So we're currently researching that. That wouldn't affect the fees that you pay, but it is something that we're looking into that I wanted to mention. So that's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
Anyone, any questions? You were actually only 18 seconds over, but
That's pretty good.
you did very well. Not that we were holding you to it, so.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
All right, at this time, we'll go to reports of administrative officials. Mayor Stuchel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would first like to thank all of our veterans who have served our country in advance of Veterans Day, and also acknowledge all of the men and women that are currently serving. We have scheduled our public forums to discuss proposed changes to the village charter. Mark Wendling, the consultant that was retained, along with other local village or city and village administrators and managers, will be holding 2 events for the community. The first being Saturday, November 19th at 3 p.m. and the second Wednesday, December 7th at 7 p.m. Both meetings will be held in council chambers. The links to the meetings on ICRC will be posted on the village website with notes from the consultant in advance of the meeting. The survey portion of this project will be made available after the 2 events. We recently had a presentation from representatives from Alloy Development, formerly known as HCDC. I am asking for your support on ordinance number 34, 2022, and asking that it be put on the table for November 17th so that we can enter into a contract with their organization for economic development opportunities. Lastly, I have been working with representatives from BASF, Cognis, and Alloy Development on a proposed tax abatement for the real property improvements to parcel number 582-001-0001. The real property improvements are expected to be at $45,848,000 with total investment of $70,454,000, with which factors into machinery and equipment. To incentivize this project, as the site was in competition with an international location, they are requesting a 75% abatement on the real property improvements for a 10-year period of time. I have provided you all with copies of the Enterprise Zone application and draft Enterprise Zone agreement with Hamilton County. Just in case you're wondering, Alloy administers the Enterprise Zone program for Hamilton County. This has been a great opportunity to personally be involved with one of our valued industrial partners, and I look forward to their continued growth and success. We are very fortunate to be able to retain such a business as BASF and Cognis, and as you probably know, this application was forwarded to the St. Bernard Elmwood Place Local School District for a review. With the anticipated increase in payroll by the creation of the new jobs during the 10-year period of time, and to clarify, once the Enterprise Zone is operational, once construction is complete, there will be revenue sharing with the school district for payroll in excess of $1 million per year during any year of the agreement. It is estimated that the revenue sharing will be approximately $15,330. The village will also enjoy the added earnings taxes from the construction jobs that are estimated at $7.5 million, with our net being $157,500. I feel that this abatement is an investment for us by allowing for both an expansion and retention opportunity with an industrial partner. So again, I have provided you with copies of everything, a copy of the proposed resolution, as well as I added an additional document for you all that was not in the email or in your box yesterday, but the estimated impact of the proposed tax abatement, which we have previously discussed. Does anyone have any questions regarding what I've provided for you all? And just to also let you know, it could not be arranged tonight, but there will be representatives from BASF and Cognis and Alloy actually at our meeting on November 17th. They will be making a brief presentation and also be able to answer additional questions.
Anyone any questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke?
make a motion to put Resolution 8 and Ordinance 34 on the table for the 17th.
I'll second that.
A motion by Mr. DeBerke, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to place resolution number 8 for the BASF Cognis on the table, as well as ordinance number 34 for the Alloy Economic Development. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Both will be placed on the table for next week. Anything else?
No, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. DeBerke.
Thank you. Auditor, Ms. Brickway.
Yes, Mr. President, I had asked to be put on the agenda to discuss going from 25,000 when you have to get a council's approval for a contract to 50,000. I don't know, Valerie, did you get a chance to?
Well, I was going to
Okay.
ask about that. I wanted to make sure, because when I looked back over my notes, I didn't know if the council had indicated they wanted me to do that or not.
Okay.
And I just wanted to get direction, and obviously we can get that prepared for next week's council meeting.
So can I ask what council's opinion is on that?
Mr. President.
Mr. Bob Culbertson.
Yeah, I think, let's look into it and report back next week on what you find out there for it.
Mr. Culbertson,
oh,
I
I'm
don't think
sorry.
we need to find anything out. The question is, what I asked for is the state has the minimum of 50,000. We're at 25,000. And it's very confusing to a lot of people because, it's different ways.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, I've been over here 20 years and it was 25,000 20 years ago. So I think it's time that we look at that. And like I said last week, it's not like anybody goes and buys something and council doesn't know about it anyway. It just makes it a little easier to run the administration.
All right, Mr. President, I'd say we put it on the table for next council meeting.
Can you
I'll
make that?
second that.
All right. A motion by Mr. Bob Culbertson. Well, I'll take other remarks in a minute. Motion by Mr. Bob Culbertson, second by Ms. Bettinghouse to place an ordinance, I'm assuming, on the
Yeah.
table next week, changing the expenditure limit from 25,000 to 50,000. Are there any other remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So ordered.
And finally, and I know he gets mad when I do this, but I think Jonathan really needs to be thanked on what he did with this BASF, because there was so many hours involved in this, and that just shows us why we need an economic developer. When you have a part-time mayor doing all this work, and I just think kudos to him for doing it and working this through. That concludes my report.
Thank you. I'll say it. Thank you, Mayor. All right, Law Director, Ms. Van Valkenburg.
Thank you. Well, Peggy took one of the things I was going to ask about today. And actually, it's kind of odd, when I was looking at the codified ordinances on the Walter Crane's website, they actually show us as having $50,000. Because I don't think they caught, when we changed it for COVID for that period of time, they didn't catch that it had an ending date. So it still shows as 50,000, but I think just to dot our i's and cross our t's, we do need an ordinance just to clear that up. So I will prepare that, and we'll have that for you. I'll try to get that out to you tomorrow to look at in anticipation of the next meeting. Also, you have in front of you a lovely, very thorough document that our tax commissioner prepared for you to look at with regarding to short-term rentals. We had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about the possibility of the taxes involved and maybe considering an excise tax. And at that point, I think Leanne was leaning toward it. Maybe not so much now. So I think she's going to address some of those issues with you tonight. And then I thought maybe we need a laws, contracts, and claims committee meeting just to, if you feel like there's an additional need after hearing Leanne kind of go through it. Otherwise, I'll just go ahead and prepare an ordinance and bring it to you to look at next month. But we did want a little guidance about some of the issues, especially relating to the tax. We had talked about some of the issues previously, but I think the tax issue is something we need to pin down. So I'll get your direction after further discussion with Leanne tonight. Also, I would like to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation following our meeting. And I believe that concludes my report. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke.
make a motion to go to executive session, then a meeting for pending litigation.
I'll second that.
A motion by Mr. DeBerke, second by Ms., I believe it was Bettinghouse, to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation at the end of this meeting. Clerk, will you please call the roll on that motion?
Mr. Taberkey?
Aye.
Mr. Bigwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
7 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Council will go into executive session to discuss pending litigation at the end of this meeting. Anything else?
No, thank you. That concludes
you.
my report.
Treasurer, Mr. Ungrue.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening, I have the balance on the Star Ohio account at the end of October, so October 31st, 2022. The village's account totaled $9,410,615.44, and I'll make a copy and put it in everyone's box. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Safety and Service Director, Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, you may get calls on the pool parking lot. The DAG has withdrawn from their contract for the school construction, so they have a new, it's actually a subcontractor, Beacon Consulting Group. They're moving ahead with everything and trying to stay on time. But they didn't know they want to start the parking lot, because I told DAG Group that they had to redo the whole thing because of all the heavy equipment. They're not doing the whole thing. They're doing a section of it, and it'll be 3 stages. So they didn't know that they should have notified the village to give advance notice to businesses. We could have helped block it off. They didn't know any of that. So they're going to put up a 500-foot fence down past Burnett, but not the entire parking lot, just a little over half. And that'll be starting tomorrow. Saturday, they'll put the fence up, and they're hoping to have that section done and blacktopped by the 28th, I believe. It's 16 days. So whatever 16 days is from tomorrow, 27th, somewhere in there, they'll have that. So you may get calls. They will follow the rules that I asked them to follow. He didn't know. They were just trying to get it because they have an opening before Thanksgiving. They thought, let's get it done right now. So that's why. But they had no idea that we were so helpful here in the village. So that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Mr. DeBerke.
Tommy, are they going to work on that sewer down there? Is Melissa saving a lot of more problems? She had MSD down there again.
Mr. President,
Mr. Paul.
if the sewer, I know they had trouble. I had 5 calls on the sewer actually backed up. It overflowed into the Milk Creek overflow section. And it pinpointed us here at Washington and Vine. The pool's got the biggest amount of water. They asked, did we do anything different? The answer to that is no. We've always slowly drained it and never had a problem. So I told them that MSD was out there doing work. They had a 30-foot hole dug. That water may have backed up due to a blockage because of the construction, unsure of that. But the sewer down in the park was damaged 2 years ago, and I made Beacon aware of that today. I said, be careful when you go grinding around there because there was damage. He didn't know that. They were left with no notes. So that being said, whatever, if it's, I tried to call her back. She didn't answer, but the fact is the St. Bernard is responsible for storm sewers only. If it's sewerage, that would be MSD. From the street into the business or into the resident, it's the residents. The village has nothing to do with that. But I didn't hear her side of the story or what she's got. She said she had information for me, but we never touched base. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Mr. DeBerke.
are they going to repair that sewer down there before they resurface? They didn't know anything about it?
Mr. President?
Mr. Paul.
Yes, he wanted to know if there was anything in writing. Obviously, I started laughing, and then he started laughing and said, thank you. We'll see what we can do. We'll talk to the school board. So,
All good? All right. All right, Tax Administrator, Ms. Helms.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me go ahead and read the October report first. October 2022 end of month receipts for tax collection were $977,728. October of 2022 is up 4.8% from October of 2021. Tax refunds for October were $33,840. Delinquent tax collected with capital recovery was $823. Delinquent tax collected with the Ohio Attorney General's office was $4,290. Taxes paid through the e-file portal were $1,632. And that concludes that report for the month of October. So I did put together some notes. I know we've talked back and forth over the last few months regarding short-term rental units. We have 8 of them that I know of in town. So that being said, the House bill, I know I talked about, initially House Bill 563 was hanging out there. And basically, the House Bill 563 was stated that no municipality can prohibit short-term rentals, but nothing prevents a municipality from enacting an ordinance that regulates and or taxes short-term rentals. It's been passed out of committee and it's now sitting on the House floor. Most likely this is going to get passed and signed by the governor. So I don't doubt that. I've talked to some other cities and they kind of concur with that. Now, that being said, there's a few options that we can do. We can have a moratorium regarding all activity with short-term rentals until the outcome of 563 is over with. We could pass an ordinance banning short-term rentals, but this would obviously have to be rescinded, if 563 becomes law. We could pass an ordinance for the excise tax and or full registration regulation for the short-term rentals. So those are a few of the options council needs to look into. And I just wrote some notes that I gathered from different cities on it. I want to explain on the tax part. At first, I was in favor for trying to do an excise tax, which we don't have in St. Bernard because we don't have any hotels or anything like that. So we've never really delved into that. But we only have 8 of these things so far. Cincinnati has over 800 of them. So they do have, the excise tax and they're in that. But talking to other cities, there isn't really great regulation because this is all still new with the state, and some cities do tax them, some cities don't. It has to go through the Airbnb or what's the other? Yeah, through their or through their website, and then it's added on. Complicated. And it doesn't really funnel through my office, it would funnel through her office. So for having only 8 of them, let's put that to the side for now until we have more of that. But as far as regulations and registration, and I did highlight a few things, just within the notes and stuff, I think that would be something that would probably be a good idea. I have one individual that does work with me, and she's very good about that. I have other properties that, they're not working with me at all. And they are required to pay earnings tax on that business, just to be clear. They do pay that. I know that we've had some problems with some of these units, and I really highly recommend, after talking to some other cities, that we kind of pass some kind of ordinance to regulate them, and also maybe have them do a registration, which I think I put down in here. It would behoove someone who has this for a business, a short-term rental, after talking to Jerry Stoker, it's a good marketing tool for them too. If you've got something that's been registered with the city and it's been, the fire department's given its blessing, it's up to code, that's something good to sell your business and to advertise with. So I think all the way around, it would be a good idea for us to try to regulate them and get some compliance. And that's so if they're not doing what they're supposed to, it gives us the ability to, get rid of it. Any input?
Mr. President?
Ms. or Valerie, sorry.
Yes. Technically, when she was talking about taxing and maybe not going forward with it, she was speaking of excise tax.
Yes.
They really are supposed to be paying
The earnings tax, correct.
Yes,
Sorry about
earnings
that.
tax. With not having a registration, we know at least one of the entities is paying earnings tax, but
Yes.
there's a little more difficulty for her making sure that happens with other entities if they're not registered. So we really want your input on what you want to do about the excise tax portion of it, because really they should be paying earnings tax anyway, and
yes.
we can make that much more clear in our ordinance, but we do want the guidance on the excise tax.
Mr. President,
Mr. Bob Culbertson.
just for clarity, do they have to register as a business since they're, doing these short-term rentals? And, if we went down the, I guess a short-term rental registration, could we charge, I see in here like a flat fee and say, $500 for 3 years or whatever that number may be, or do we charge that already for businesses?
I do not. So if someone wants to register, having, like a landlord having rental property, they'll register, they'll file a tax return, and they have an account in the system. There's no fee, there's no registration process like this. It's just basically having a tax account in our system. But yeah, I mean, sometimes they come forward, sometimes it's a guessing game. Sometimes I have to, send multiple letters trying to figure out, what you got going on there. It can be difficult at times.
Mr. President,
Mayor Frenchel.
in discussion previously, I'd been requesting that something similar to this, not necessarily this exact program, but in working through the process, of course, knowing that, the pending House Bill 563, kind of sitting idle on this a little bit so that we didn't have to backtrack after establishing something. But one of the biggest issues that we have had is really with one particular location. So we do have one very, very responsible, Airbnb owner, and they are absolutely phenomenal individuals. They manage great, homes and are a real asset to the community. But we've had one extreme thorn in our side here that we've not been able to get any enforcement. It was bizarre the way it was set up, because the particular home that I'm speaking of, it was purchased under a land contract. So until it was actually final, and the final transfer had taken place, trying to actually track down the individual was next to impossible. So the house itself was advertised as a party house that sleeps 16. So the home itself actually did not have any fire suppression. There was no fire escapes. 3.5 full floors of of partiness, and so, and lots of beds, which just seemed like a death trap. House, siding falling off the house, that's finally been repaired. But point being is that we could never get in the house. So trying to come up with a program that would allow us to go through some type of inspection process that would allow for, fire, health, building code, all of that to be reviewed. So, trying to get some type of a program in place so that we could get in before somebody dies. And then ultimately, it was a situation where, the neighbors were having to be very tolerant. Luckily, Airbnb, I think, dropped these individuals so that you don't have the same parties, but it's still an unregulated transient house. So again, I am in favor of moving with something, but as long as we're not going to be in a situation where we have to backtrack because of the final outcome of House Bill 563.
Mr. President.
Ray Culbertson.
Yeah, Jonathan, I agree with everything you said there, and Bob. In lieu of us trying to do the excise tax, I would love to see us adopt this registration form similar to Cincinnati's, where we're charging a flat fee, where we're overcoming those obstacles of getting into the building or even finding ownership on the building. But yeah, I'd very much be in favor of that.
Mr. President?
Mr. DeBerke.
Though 4 or 6 years ago, there was a rental registration program. Would these fall under that? I'm assuming that program's dead since nobody's down there.
Mr. President? Yeah, I did talk to Jerry Stoker about that, and he said it is dead. I mean, I have within the tax code, the lords are supposed to report tenants. That language is in the tax code, but as far as registering, the way, was it Bob Ostertag, I think, that did that? Yeah, we don't have that code anymore, or we're not, doing that anymore for now. But I don't know, was there some code language? I don't remember.
There was Mr. President, there was a program, and then it was done away with, essentially.
So if we do this short-term rental, would that include apartments and two-family stuff too?
Mr. President? So House Bill 563 did specifically say in its language that anything that we adopt should be consistent. If we do it with these short-term rentals, we should be consistent at least with, the enforcement of nuisance laws and things like that with our rental units, as long as we have consistency, is what 563's language was saying.
So if we decide to charge short-term rentals $250 a year or whatever, somebody owning an apartment building has to do the same thing then?
I don't think so. I mean, that's something that Valerie and I would have to look into, but I don't necessarily know that we would have to do that with actual. The short-term rentals are more of a business model, whereas someone who has rental property, they may own the property, but they have tenants that live and work and participate in the community, on a long-term basis. So there's a little bit of a difference.
Mr. President?
Ms. Brickway.
Yeah, I think there is a difference, and we also have an ordinance out there that you can't rent a room. So I think if we worded it correctly, that it's a B&B, it's totally different than an apartment or renting a house.
Mr. President.
Mr. Bob Culbertson.
So just to, I guess, clarify, short-term rentals, are we saying less than 30 days is considered short-term?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
there
there
a
is
defined
language
number of days.
that defines exactly what a short-term rental is within, like Cincinnati's ordinance has specific language and specific definitions of that.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Ms. Bettinghouse.
I agree with what has been discussed as far as the tax and not including that, but definitely a registration and standard. And I was just reading real quickly over the Cincinnati, so like a fee, I'm totally in favor of that.
That's
So-
all I had now.
So it
For now.
so as you had stated earlier, possibly, or one of you two, I forget, possibly a laws, contracts, and claims to
Yeah.
kind of formalize all this and then move forward from there.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Mr. President, I'll
Yes.
work on preparing something. I'm not going to be able to get anything before next week,
Yeah.
obviously, but try to get something by early December
Okay.
if we want to get something set up.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse.
for Laws, Contracts, and Claims Committee in December. Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much. All right. Move to reports of standing committees. Finance, Mr. DeVerke.
No report.
Thank you. Safety, Mr. Brickwick.
Yes, Mr. President. Tonight I have the report for September for the Police Department activity report. For the month of September, the Police Department had 544 total contacts involving over 569 calls for service. These calls for service included 56 total criminal offenses resulting in 115 criminal arrests. There were 40 traffic citations as well as 62 traffic warnings, and they responded to 21 accidents. As far as news and notes go, our police department was recognized for and received a certificate of appreciation from Faith and Friends Radio for outstanding commitment to our community. They were chosen from many outstanding candidates based on a nomination from a citizen after their recent involvement with our department. And we have hired, as the mayor said last meeting, Mackenzie Record, who was previously from Elmwood PD. The chief wants to report that background checks and testing are being performed on several other candidates, and you will be seeing more new faces in the not too distant future. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Service, Ms. Housefeld.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Public Improvements, Mr. Bob Culbertson.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Laws, Contracts, and Claims, Ms. Bettinghouse.
No report.
Thank you. Marketing, Mr. Ray Culbertson.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'd like to remind the residents that this year's Light Up St. Bernard Night will be held on the same night as our village Christmas celebration, which is Saturday, December 3rd. Residents are invited to pick up their free luminary kits on the following dates: Sunday, November 13th from 2 to 6 p.m., Sunday, November 20th from 2 to 6 p.m., Sunday, November 27th from 2 to 6 p.m., and Thursday, December 1st, 6 to 8 p.m. Again, these can be picked up at the rec office. Please pick them up and let's make St. Bernard shine. The next St. Bernard Ludlow Grove Historical Society meeting will take place on November 21st at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building. There will be a program titled East Side, West Side, All Around the Vine, the Lost Neighborhood of St. Bernard, presented by Kay Heller Phillips. And lastly, thanks to all the veterans who dedicated their lives to our country. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Business and Industry, Mr. Schultmeyer.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. There are no one in the audience. So I am showing a total of 3 ordinances for next Thursday and 1 resolution. And then obviously council meeting will be next Thursday at 7 p.m. Next committee of the whole will be December 8th. And at this time, council will go into executive session to discuss pending litigation.